Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, and that's all you really need to know. Friday, November 17th, 2023. I don't know that the date matters all that much. It's Friday. Woo! I need some sort of weird sound effects to celebrate the fact that the weekend is coming, baby. All right. Well, at any rate, this is what we have to work with today. It is Friday, and hey, the world is a crazy place, and we'll tell you all about it, and we'll tell you all about it with the help of a couple of listeners who have some part of it that they want to tell you about as well. So we're on. Everything's A-okay. Justice says the signal's going out. He's got some clues about what's on his mind today, and you know what? Everybody's crazy, basically. All right, let's see. The first tip-off, I know kind of, sort of what's going on. I'm losing track of what's on people's minds. But I guess the first hint of what's on his mind this morning is this crazy, wacky story, which, of course, is turning out, as most of these crazy, wacky stories do, that they may not really be true. I don't know. Something's happening where I guess the olds are running around and they're worried that the TikTok has gotten to the kids. Another wave of we got to get rid of TikTok or something because something, China, I don't know. And the story, at the base of the story is supposed to be a trending, viral type sharing phenomenon of some kind that thousands of people are posting their videos to TikTok, essentially like offering a historical reconsideration of Osama bin Laden, which I doubt that a whole lot of people are really doing that, for one thing. And as it turns out, by the way, that was true. Not a whole lot of people were actually doing it. But I guess apparently one Twitter account got super viral telling everybody that was the case and that thousands of people were doing this. And as it turns out, I guess digging into it, TikTok felt compelled to look, and I guess there's 200 and something people who have reposted. I don't know what they call it on TikTok. There are a couple of people, maybe one person. I don't even know. I didn't look that far into it, but somebody basically, I don't know. It sounds like they were maybe vaping at the performance of Beetlejuice, and they videoed themselves saying, yeah, like killing a whole bunch of people, that's really bad. But then again, he was really totally like saying, man, that America shouldn't interfere and ruin people's lives or whatever, man. And I don't know. But that he had some sort of somebody actually, I did, again, within the 10 seconds I gave it to see, it looked like they were arguing. It was very odd. I mean, it really was like somebody was a little high, and they had something to say about, well, knocking down the World Trade Center, it's like the end of Fight Club, man, except the buildings weren't empty. Well, that's the difference between massive property destruction. It was probably disproportionate to the problem and perpetrated by somebody that had no particular moral authority to make that point, but that, and on the other hand, wholesale murder on a mass scale. Well, there's a lot of room in between. And anyway, so no, it wasn't a movie. It was real life, and they killed a whole bunch of people. And, that makes a big difference. But, and then they were trying to basically come around to the point of, yeah, but, world trade, that's where, well, first of all, I think they made the mistake of saying, what was going on in the World Trade Center? That's the headquarters of the World Trade Organization. Is it? No, I don't know. And at any rate, the idea that, well, he was looking to bring down the international financial order. I mean, maybe that might also have been true too, but bin Laden was a fairly wealthy guy. I don't know that he was really worried about inequality in income distribution. I don't think that was a big issue for him personally that he took a lot of action on. He didn't like America, and America liked money, so he figured he could wipe that out as well. So I don't know. I don't have any deep thoughts on that'll change your mind about Osama bin Laden. Just my main concern is that apparently the whole world was turned upside down, scouring TikTok for evidence that there was a mass movement to reevaluate the historical record of Osama bin Laden, and apparently that's not true. And so, I don't know, I guess you can go to sleep at night tonight without worrying about it. The other part I haven't seen. Let's see, what other thing on your mind here, Justice? It's expensive to AstroTurf 50 cars abandoned on the Bay Bridge. You got me. That might as well be ghost buses for me. But at least you're trying to be cryptic about it, which is contrasting with waking up and trying to figure out right-wing people who are, I was going to say legitimately outraged. They're not legitimately outraged. They are literally outraged, but not legitimately so. Yesterday, in the roundup of the crazy, okay, here comes the update on it. And I know you probably want to know this too before I go to the next thing. Here's the story in San Francisco, the sfgate.com. Let's see. The Bay Bridge protesters. Oh, okay. Well, that makes some sense. Fully shut down westbound traffic. Only westbound? Was that the point? I don't know. But protesters blocked westbound traffic. All the westbound lanes are now reopened, reopened yesterday. I don't know. What were they doing? I am sure it was. Yeah, there it is. There's their banner in which they're calling for a ceasefire. It's a very large banner. And I guess they must have blocked traffic to hang this thing. Other than they're calling specifically Biden ceasefire. Now, Biden is not shooting anybody, as it turns out. But we understand this to mean that they are calling on him to call on somebody else to implement the ceasefire. Okay, so they went to block the bridge. And what was it you were saying about your comment earlier? Okay, expensive AstroTurf 50 cars abandoned on the Bay. Oh, okay. Well, is that what happened? Okay, westbound. Oh, I see. Westbound was going into San Francisco during Joe's meeting with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, and the beautiful chocolate cake, which was not, I wonder if he asked about that. Is there no cake available here in San Francisco? And the answer, of course, is no, because you can't bake cake for gay people anymore or something. I don't know. I'm not certain what happened or what they ate, but all right, blocking westbound into San Francisco during the meeting. Okay. I mean, there's protest. All right, let's see what other things here. And lastly, $28K a pop with the keys thrown into San Francisco Bay. Okay. Those must have been the car. So what happened? Did they toss cars into, I got to read this story now. Protesters drove onto the Bay Bridge and parked their cars. Really? I thought they would have ridden their solar unicycles or something onto the Bay Bridge. But parked their cars, they were looking to block things, so you bring a car if you want to screw things up. They parked their cars just east of Treasure Island. I do love that name. Bringing westbound traffic to a complete standstill around 8 a.m. As of 10:15 a.m. Is this yesterday? Has to be, right? Because it's only like 1 a.m. in California at this point. The right shoulder was open to cars, and let's see, it was said here, I missed a highway patrol officer, Art Montiel, who said lane 1 was expected to open in the next 20 minutes. So this is yesterday's news I'm bringing you. It's very timely. It's going to take a little while to have it fully open, at least another hour or so at the very least. So horribly disruptive. Arrest everybody because reasons. All right, let's see. It's some nice images. They made some nice banners. And, well, what can I tell you? There's protest everywhere these days. What's the story? Oh, they abandoned their cars. Thank you for giving me the short version of it, Justice. They abandoned their cars and threw the keys into the bay like they have all the money in the world from AstroTurf groups. That is interesting. I mean, it's dedication. Maybe the cars were stolen. I don't know. Maybe they were donated by CarMax. I have no idea. But, yeah, okay, so that's interesting. And they threw the keys in the ocean so that they couldn't move it. That's in the bay, not in the ocean. It was a very long throw. They're superheroes, and they're able to hurl their keys into the open ocean. It's a tactic. I don't know where you get that kind of money, but now we know why they drove the cars there. They didn't care about them in the first place. And, of course, you can get those solar-powered unicycles out of the way a lot easier. And they want to make life difficult for the authorities attempting to reopen the bridge. Okay. So, what else might people be upset about today? Just before the show, I kind of spotted this one on Blue Sky, the new Twitter, if you will, although not everybody agrees that that's where you should be. But if you're looking for invitation codes, by the way, to join Blue Sky, you want to do that. I have more available. Others have more available. We have a nice little distribution network. It's a giant pain in the neck. But if you want to get on there and there's no code, nothing has landed on your lap yet, we can probably get you fixed up with that. Just let me know, and we'll pass a few along. So just before coming aboard today, let's see. I saw Dave Weigel talking about this. It was interesting, just in terms of, he made some good observations about it, but I picked it up for the news value, that is, of figuring out what Republicans are angry about today. And yesterday we learned that they were angry about ghost buses and the fact that FBI Director Chris Wray might not spend as much time on Twitter as Murdery Trader Green does, and that's a bad thing because then you won't see all of her angry messages. But ghost buses we learned about, and now we find Riley Gaines, whose name might be somewhat familiar, a competitive swimmer, as I recall, who joined up in the anti-trans movement, essentially to deliver the message that there should be no, as Dave puts it here, no biological males in women's sports. The Republicans found that to be very resonant in their anti-trans campaigns, in that they could find that even people who considered themselves far more open to transgender people and issues would object over sports because, I don't know, sports. I'm not really sure what was driving it. But then as it turns out, every time people would look around and say, how many times is this happening? How many biological males are moving over into women's sports and winning everything and dominating the sport? And the answer is, in most cases, almost zero, if not actually zero. But, that didn't stop them from being outraged about litter boxes in elementary schools either. So, I don't know. Maybe you can outrage them about anything. But Dave was pointing out David. And he's Dave only on the online platforms, I guess, where he's tweeting and texting to us. But the new outrage, I did catch this the other day. So it's not that Riley Gaines brought it to my attention, though she plays an interesting role in all of this. She has woken up, gotten out of bed early, I guess, this morning, to go on Fox News to wring her hands and lament that it's Target, I think, right? Target is selling Christmas items that do not meet with her approval. In this case, alternatively decorated, I don't know what you would call it, knickknacks, trinkets for your shelves, including the traditional nutcracker, but decorated with gay pride or trans pride, is that what they call it? Flag colors schemes on the hat of the traditional nutcracker, which presumably is some sort of Central European, 18th century soldiery is being represented in the traditional nutcracker. But it's been a long time since they've been doing this, but they're looking to sell different trinkets to different people. Like, there's not a lot of, let's say, how many Prussians can you sell nutcrackers to, at Target at this late stage of things? And so we moved into the era of equal representation among nutcrackers. They've long since started merchandising nutcrackers that look like other things, such that other people would be motivated to buy them. oh, I have a nutcracker already, I don't need another one, or I don't crack nuts at all, they come out of the shell these days. And also, by the way, if you've ever tried to use one of those nutcrackers that they sell you at Christmas time at Target and put a walnut in it, you'll have to go back to Target and get yourself another nutcracker. That don't work. Anyway, the point is, they've been selling, alternative nutcrackers since forever. Is somebody in your family a firefighter and they're extremely happy about being a firefighter and whatever, and they want firefighter type trinkets? Get them a nutcracker decorated like a firefighter. The policeman, army, like current army ones. You can't, it's funny. Like, you could, if someone was in the army, career army officer, you might get them a regular nutcracker, but they don't see themselves in this strange Russian, Prussian, Central Eastern European 18th century style uniform. So they get them ones with, modern camouflage on, which is interesting. Oh, if you didn't wrap it, that's a good idea. You shouldn't wrap it. Just put it under the tree. It's well hidden. It's in camouflage. No one has tried this. We have one in the house that looks like a Boy Scout. Okay, right? There's Boy Scouts in our house. Let's get them a nutcracker that looks like them so that they can identify with this thing that stands there and does nothing but cracks nuts, whatever. You know the story. But Riley Gaines is joining the group, angry that nutcrackers don't look like antiquated Prussian soldiers anymore. Now they might actually be something. They don't look like trans people either, but they have a hat that has the colors, and this is outrageous. Alongside Santa Claus figurines, a couple of years ago we had the outrage, oh my God, someone is selling black Santas. And you remember, wasn't it, what's her name, from Fox News? Dang, I've lost the memory of her name. But that's a good thing, if you ask me. But she was outraged. The one Donald Trump sometimes hates, sometimes doesn't. It's good that her name is out of my mind. But, we can't have that because everybody knows Santa is white. Like, historically, he's white. Well, historically is a fictional character, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, they've gone too far at Target. They're selling black Santas in a wheelchair, which presumably means that this person is disabled and in the wheelchair. But hey, who knows what they could be, culturally appropriating wheelchairs. I'm not really sure. But once again, it's, I guess, for people who think that they know someone or who they themselves identify with some aspect of what they see in this Santa that they don't see in the white Santa figurines where Santa's pole vaulting or whatever it is that he's doing, ableist that he is. And I mean, look, all it is we've tried selling people white Santas, and there's some segment of the market that says, I have enough white pole vaulting Santas. I need something else. And somebody thought, what about if it was a black Santa? What if it was a black Santa in a wheelchair? Could we sell some of them? Now, it may be a huge mistake, and maybe they don't sell any. I don't know. They're willing to take that risk. But all it is somebody thought that would be interesting. Or maybe somebody's just a Santa figurine collector and thought, this is unusual. I should get one of these. I thought I had the world beat with the pole vaulter. I got to get one of these and add it to the collection. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Not only does it not matter, but it can't possibly really matter to Riley Gaines either. And that's what Dave's point was here when he says audience capture. He loves his SAT words too. Audience capture is the fulcrum of history. That's a little highfalutin for what the real point of this is. Gaines, he notes, started out with one cause: no biological males in women's sports. But she's now ensconced in this media ecosystem because she's on there as, what do they identify? I got to get down close to the screen here. She's, okay, I don't know if it's a podcast or whatever, but she's listed here as Riley Gaines Outkick host? So, okay, she hosts something. I don't know what it is. So she's a commentator But anyway, yeah, she got into the game to advocate against allowing biological males in women's sports, but she's now ensconced in this media ecosystem, so she needs a take on diverse Santas. And Fox News says, let's put that on television. It's just interesting. Like, you don't really, if you're handed the television platform for the morning, like black disabled Santa and maybe gay nutcracker, you know, I don't know. I thought America wanted to hear about something. This is a war. There's a couple of wars. The economy, something they keep saying. Everybody is interested in the economy. You could get on there and wish people Merry Christmas, whatever it is. Riley Gaines. All right. Some update from Justice here. Olympic swimmer, loser who lost at the Olympics and has been whining ever since. Yeah. I recall that she was a competitive swimmer, but I can't remember, whether she was Olympics level or whether she was, I think there was at one point, or maybe she was still in college at the time and was complaining that like maybe she might not win the NCAA national title or something because she was afraid that a biological male might take it away from her. Maybe he even did. I don't know. I guess we would say she did. But I don't even know or care that story, really. It was an interesting point that should be made, and it worked very well. It was a great wedge issue that made people who were otherwise open to, and just learning their way through, even at the time, trans issues and getting comfortable with things and figuring, oh yes, all right, well, there are things I can do to make this transition easier for people. Why don't we want to do that? Especially if it protects kids who are otherwise vulnerable. Oh, well, I see what you mean. This unfair competition thing. But is it happening? It is not happening very much? Okay, so then that's not an issue. But I guess you can only stay famous on that if it's not an issue for so long. And so now you have to be you got to roll out of bed and get dressed and get there early in the morning into studio so that you can be there to talk about the horrors of, oh, they painted a nutcracker a different color. Oh my God, what, make them black? No, they put a weird hat on them that had funky colors on there. But they're politically meaningful colors. All right. Then what? You're not dressing an actual army in those colors. It's just one fake nutcracker army guy who doesn't even work as a nutcracker. I don't know. But it's occupied 20 minutes of our time, which obviously is a huge success for them. And congratulations then to Riley Gaines for doing this to us for the morning. I knew there were some other things I wanted to tell you. And maybe we'll give the next segments over to allowing the other people who actually have something to add to the conversation to add it. There are plenty. And let's see, this morning I have Rosalyn MacGregor reporting on the latest from Ottawa County, Michigan. We also have Steve Satig, who is making another appearance. He actually picked out of a hat an article that I had said, oh, I should read this thing tomorrow. And then I ruined the whole thing and I did the Nutcracker and Riley Gaines instead. So this one, going back to Jessica Valenti's Substack that we cited the other day. I don't think I had ever read it before, but do you know what it's about? It's titled Abortion Every Day. That's the name of the Substack. You remember it now? And she's got another, I'm sure she's talking about it every day per the title, but this is a different article and a very interesting and imaginative one, and certainly something we ought to look out for. And now Steve has saved me the trouble of reading it for you and saved you the trouble of hearing an extra 15 minutes of asides about what occurs to me as I read it. But we'll wait for the next segment and get through the break. On the other hand, well, why don't we start off with this one here, which I put aside, and then later, like 15 minutes later, got a note from Scott saying, you should put this one aside because it looks like a good article, the kind of thing we would like to discuss on the show. And both you and Steve are 100% right. This one is a Reuters report, a special report, in fact. U.S. political violence driven by new breed of grab bag extremists. And what else would you call somebody who's outraged equally by there might be a biological male competing in my niche sport, and there's also maybe a gay nutcracker, possibly a black disabled Santa as well. Also, by the way, gay nutcracker. Like I have seen Republicans saying, this is an outrage because the real nutcracker, which is also a fictional character, is not gay, and how dare you? And it's a Christmas tradition, and therefore Jesus, and for you to mix that with gay people, holy mackerel, this is the worst thing in the world. And I have seen the nutcracker performed a few times, and I don't know. It's not the straightest thing in the world, I guess I would say. But again, many interpretations of what the nutcracker is supposed to look like. And every year it's performed by a different person. And holy mackerel, what do you know? No one complains about that. But they are typically white. But I certainly wouldn't put past local, Moms for Liberty types to scream and cry if there was a black performer in the nutcracker one year, in which there is every year, thank God. But, something about, I don't know, what's the setting? Russia? The nutcracker? I guess so. Anyway, so let me tease this for you and we'll bring it back on the other side of the break. U.S. political violence driven by new breed of grab bag extremists, angry about everything from Barbies to ghost buses to gay nutcrackers, of course, and black Santas. A new breed of extremist has sparked the deadliest wave of U.S. political violence in decades. So it's a real thing, and it's really happening, and it's really serious. These self-made radicals, we could probably blame someone else for making them as well, mixing right-wing conspiracy theories and marginal beliefs, forgo logic and coherence in favor of personal grievances. I wonder who might have role modeled this for them. I can't think of anybody like that. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's dive right in and see how much of this we can get through without disrupting ourselves too much. And we're trying to keep in mind that I've got these recorded segments to share with you. U.S. political violence driven by new breed of grab bag extremists. This by Ned Parker, Peter Eisler, and Joseph Tanfani, a November 15th publication. Again, Reuters special report. And it's very special, if you ask me. Before he committed mass murder in Colorado late last year, Anderson Lee Aldrich was a lively presence among a group of friends who regularly assembled online for hours to chat, play video games, and trade internet memes. Yikes. So normal, right? The four irreverent young men shared a desire to mock cancel culture. They're canceling cancel culture? and laugh over dumb, silly stuff. I would imagine not that different than what we're doing right here. Well, this, according to Gilbert Arroyo, one of the friends who spoke with the Reuters reporters here, but over the roughly 3 years of their gatherings, the memes and quips Aldrich shared grew increasingly racist, homophobic, and violent, according to 3 of the gamers, should be no surprise here, and a Reuters review of online content that Aldrich assembled. Despite his vitriol, the friend said, Aldrich's jokes were more scattershot humor than ideological manifesto. They never perceived him to be espousing any particular belief system or aligning with specific hate groups or political causes. They were shocked, then, when Aldrich, wielding an assault rifle, of course, and a handgun, entered Club Q, the gay nightclub in Colorado Springs, and opened fire last November. The 22-year-old, who once dreamed of joining the military, killed 5 people and injured 22. He pleaded guilty in June to murder charges and is serving 5 consecutive life terms in state prison. Not much time for online gaming and joking, then. Arroyo said he never expected Aldrich to act upon the hate and violence his joking conveyed. Nothing was meant to be taken seriously, Arroyo said in an interview. Nobody should have been killed. Well, he's right about that. But by the way, I mean, another familiarity. Well, people engaging in political violence because they have personal grievances, et cetera, right up the beginning. Golly, I don't know where that could have come from. Similarly, remember, he's just joking. Don't take him literally, or take him seriously, but not literally. But hey, don't even take him seriously if it might get him in trouble. We see this all the time. Aldrich is an example of a new and troubling type of violent American extremist, according to law enforcement officials and political scientists. The grab bag radical. I guess they've got a book probably in the works about this. Past perpetrators tended to fall into 2 broad categories. One includes militants recruited and trained by others to defend a cause, such as the anti-government beliefs of far-right militias. The other was a previous breed of lone wolf terrorist, as they call it, obsessed and informed by a clear issue that motivated attacks, like the bombings by Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, because of his opposition to technology. Aldrich, by contrast, embodies a novel extremism forged distinctly by today's polarized politics, fragmented online discourse, and prevalence of fictional narratives, ghost buses, gay nutcrackers, disabled Santas, litter boxes, whatever. Like other actors behind a wave of political violence analyzed by Reuters, Aldrich wove his own brand of fanaticism from disparate strands of conspiracy theories widely circulating on the internet, pulling from a hodgepodge of marginal beliefs, in Aldrich's case, homophobic, racist, and anti-Semitic ideas that later featured on a website. These radicals often eschew firm creeds. Instead, they embrace whatever brew of notions, no matter how divergent, blends with their particular grievances. Fueled, no doubt, by doing their own research, as they say. There's a mixed bag approach to their beliefs, said Brian Hughes, an assistant professor at American University in Washington, D.C., and co-founder of a program that studies extremism there. With the scattered, often haphazard nature of online content, you can string together all kinds of concepts in a way where logic doesn't have to factor in at all, much less ideological consistency. And sometimes that's just simply explained by gimmitarianism. My ideology is whatever I want at the moment. Reuters recently documented the most sustained spate of political violence in the United States since a decade of upheaval that began in the late 1960s. To date, the news organization has identified at least 232 violent incidents fueled by political motives since the storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump on January 6th. And they always helpfully add that was in 2021. The events range from riots to brawls at political demonstrations to beatings and murders. The incidents involve violence emanating from across the political spectrum, both sides, Oh my. Including dozens of cases of substantial property damage by leftists. Yikes. At political demonstrations. By the way, there's always pretty substantial property damage left behind by political demonstrations of any kind. But okay. But of the 22 fatal incidents among the total tally involving the deaths of 44 victims and 11 attackers, most were attributed to assailants like Aldrich, who expressed beliefs associated with the extreme right, Reuters found. That at least sounds more like it. In 15 of those attacks, in which 38 victims and 7 attackers died, the perpetrator had articulated far-right beliefs, many of them targeting racial, sexual, or other minorities. Only one fatal incident, the 2022 stabbing of a journalist by a public administrator in Nevada, was carried out by an assailant clearly identified with the left. It's impossible to say in these cases that political rhetoric itself led to killing, and history shows that violence can rise from the left, right, or any other political position. But law enforcement officials and researchers interviewed by Reuters say that the promotion of once marginal conspiracy theories by prominent Republicans, especially Trump, and of course a huge swath of the Republican House conference as well, ghost buses, etc., has pushed fringe ideas into the mainstream. That amplification of far-right rhetoric can make it easier for people with violent propensities to encounter those ideas, embrace them, and justify their deeds as ideological or political. And now, of course, entering into the political season, Facebook, I believe, notified everyone that they would be just fine with you placing paid advertisements that claim that the 2020 election was stolen or rigged in some way. That's now A-OK under their new policy, which is the policy of, hey, people will spend money on that. Okay, we ought to collect that money. To hell with, protecting people from malicious craziness. Of the far-right assailants in the fatal cases reviewed by Reuters, at least 12 had done their own research, or promoted extremist beliefs on the internet. At least 6 were ardent Trump supporters. Of course, I guess if you went through my record now and you looked at all my podcasts and you just compiled, well, how often does YouTube flag his content with warnings that, this is what really happened on January 6th, or this is what really happened with COVID. But of course, how many of those flags are because I said, look at this crazy person elsewhere on the internet who has said this terrible thing. How dumb could you possibly be? And then I get the flag. Anyway. But I guess if you were writing a story about me, his material is flagged repeatedly by online content monitors at YouTube. Trustworthy old YouTube. All right. Well, at any rate, extremist narratives have gained a sense of mainstream credibility and legitimacy because of who's promoting the ideas, said Michael Jensen, who runs the University of Maryland's Profiles of Individual Radicalization in the United States project. That's some project. He's speaking, of course, of Trump, the guy who is ostensibly president of the United States, saying these things. It makes it normal looking for other people to do the same. Trump has appeared to condone violence repeatedly in recent public statements. At an event in late September, he said federal troops should shoot shoplifters. That's proportional. Days earlier on social media, he wrote that Mark Milley, whom he had appointed chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, had been treasonous and that in times gone by, the punishment would have been death. Of course, same for him, but, never mind that. In an interview with a right-leaning website, he employed language often used by racist groups, saying undocumented immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. And during a Veterans Day speech last week, he referred to political opponents as vermin, a term historians say has often been used by autocrats in the past to dehumanize and provoke violence against rivals. Stephen Chung, the spokesman for Trump, did not respond to questions from Reuters. We'll skip the rest of that bit. Some of the killers in cases reviewed by Reuters acknowledge being swayed by rhetoric. Rory Banks, a convicted murderer from Wheaton, California, told Reuters Trump's 2020 loss, and it is a loss, led him to online chat groups and to embrace the fabricated theories of QAnon, which holds that a cabal of leftist satanic pedophiles controls the U.S. government. In a telephone interview from prison, and by the way, are you against government shutdowns if you believe a cabal of leftist satanic pedophiles controls the U.S. government? Probably not, right? In a telephone interview from prison, Banks said his obsession led him to find convicted sex offenders near his home and in May of 2021, kill one. His entry point was stop the steal, stuff like that, he said, referring to the false belief fomented by Trump himself that the former president was cheated at the ballot box. I got into the message boards and I met other people through social media and it didn't take long. I remember just yesterday, we were reading the story of how people got into this, found themselves radicalized to the point where, who were we talking about? Oh, yes, I was probably mispronouncing his name the whole time. I don't know why I wasn't thinking French pronunciation, but does Paul Pelosi's assailant pronounce his name as Dupop? Or Depop rather than Depape. I don't know. I was wondering whether they might have anglicized it over the years. And he says Depape, but it should be Depop. I don't know. Maybe he actually says Depop. Doesn't matter. I don't really care about whether I'm mispronouncing his name or not. But he told the story of he got into his craziness that led him to assault Pelosi through Gamergate. I was just looking for cheat codes online for the game I like to play. And I got into that and I saw these videos about how this one feminist critic of video games was such a toxic person and so horrific. And golly gee, I ended up spending all my time on that instead of playing the video games. And then the next thing you know, record scratch, I found myself hitting Paul Pelosi over the head with a hammer and on trial for it. And by the way, he was convicted before the end of the day yesterday. So, but this happens all the time, right? And I was just researching ghost buses, and then all of a sudden I found myself in Congress. I don't know how it happened. That's actually the murdery Trader Green story. She was a wackadoodle QAnon YouTuber, and then, I don't know, now she's in Congress. I don't know what happened. Anyway, one reason people get radicalized online is that meme culture can quickly reduce issues to a punchline. Uh-oh, oops, that's me. Or a call to arms. And by circulating entirely online with no checks on factuality or origin, that's me, memes and the joking around them can convey messages and provoke reactions with none of the back and forth that happens in person, let alone the learning acquired through research, real research, or deep study. These people who take this amount of content that's packaged in this particular form of humor, they are desensitized, said Jacob Ware, a Washington-based security specialist and research fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, a think tank. The breezier the chit-chat, he added, the easier for budding extremists to overlook the implications. When you're so immersed in this meme space, he said, the victims stop being human. Aldrich, Banks, and at least 7 more of those charged or convicted in murders reviewed by Reuters had at some point claimed to suffer or were treated for mental health issues, according to the court documents, police records, and other documentation. But those who study extremism say psychiatric problems alone rarely induce political violence. No one radicalizes in a vacuum, says Jensen, the Maryland political scientist. They do it within social networks. An important point to make for, I would imagine, according to mental health advocates. They would be appreciative, I think, of having pointed that out, that rarely is mental illness itself something that leads by itself to political violence. To understand this path toward extremism, Reuters examined the history of 15 assailants whose writings and statements detailed the sources and tenets of their far-right radicalization. Reporters interviewed more than 50 law enforcement officials, attorneys, relatives, and friends of the perpetrators, among others. The news organization also mined their internet history and social media posts, as well as police reports, court records, and other documents. The perpetrators share some common traits. They are listed here. None belonged to any hate group or other extremist organization or adhered to a single distinct ideology. At least half consumed or promoted some mix of white supremacist and anti-Semitic material online. Others followed QAnon, anti-government, or homophobic conspiracy theories. Some also embraced misogyny and the male supremacy movement. Several were influenced by so-called Great Replacement theory, a belief that elites, in quotes, often Jews, because they're so elite, are orchestrating the demise of white culture through immigration, black empowerment, feminism, and LGBTQ rights. It's an interesting way to achieve world domination. Hand over rights and advocate on behalf of a lot of other people. And then by extension, I don't know what, they'll pay you tribute somehow and put you, I don't know. The extremists' motives are incomprehensible to relatives of those they've killed. I don't really know what was going through his head, said Stephanie Clark, whose sister, Ashley Paw, worked with foster children before Aldrich murdered her at Club Q. She would have done anything for anyone. She would have tried to help him. Next up, the end of the world. Next section. That's a hell of a section. From the late 1960s through the mid-1970s, many extremists joined groups aligned with the left, particularly spurred by the civil rights movement and opposition to the Vietnam War. By the 1990s, the pendulum had swung right. Militias and white power groups became a source of radicalization against government authority. And I guess that's what accounts for the right wing's ability to continue with the trope. Like if you remember from the 60s and 70s when that sort of radicalization was mostly left-leaning, I guess you're susceptible to being told that that's just still the case now, though it really hasn't been for many, many decades at this point. Trump's embrace of conspiracy theories dates back at least to his promotion of the falsehood that former President Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. In his successful 2016 campaign, Trump vilified immigrants, said Mexico was sending criminals across the border, and suggested that the father of Republican Senator Ted Cruz, don't forget that, an opponent, at the time anyway, was linked to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The role that Trump played in 2016 is what was truly the accelerant in mainstreaming fringe conspiracy theories, said Matt Kreiner, a director at Middlebury College's Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism in Monterey, California. With increasingly radical rhetoric, he added, dissatisfied citizens are more likely to believe that the only solution is violence. An August survey by the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, you know them, a nonprofit research organization based in Washington, found that 13% of Democrats and one-third of Republicans believe true American patriots may have to resort to violence to save our country. The overall 23% of respondents who agreed marked an increase from 15% in a similar poll in 2021. In Elwell, a town in central Michigan, Troy Burke, a building contractor, came to believe online conspiracy theories after the 2020 election. The United States, he told police, was headed for civil war. He even bought a t-shirt, probably, that said so. QAnon believers were an elite group battling it out for freedom, for Trump, to save our republic, he said, according to police records. Well, by early 2021, Burke, then 44 years old, came to believe that his wife, Jessica, was instead a transgender person fathered by President Joe Biden. Can happen to anybody, right? He also believed that Jessica, a 29-year-old shop employee, was an asset of the Central Intelligence Agency. If I didn't put 3 rounds in the back of her head, he told investigators, it was the end of the world. That does seem outlandish, don't you think? His wife. On January 27, 2021, he shot her dead. A court last year found Burke not guilty by reason of insanity. That might really be true. He is now detained at a Michigan state psychiatric facility. His attorney, Sarah Heuser, didn't respond to requests for comment. I wouldn't either. Because they don't assemble and aren't affiliated with organized groups, today's extremists can radicalize in isolation and raise little suspicion. And no matter how troubling their online activity might be, much of it is protected as free speech under the U.S. Constitution. We even have people in courtrooms right now saying I wasn't interfering with the election and intimidating election workers. I was providing ministry to them, pastoral ministry. Something. Even if they're actually ordained versus getting it on the internet, seems a little shaky. And of course, I can't be convicted of attacking Pelosi in order to try to influence federal policy. I was attacking them because I knew that they were pedophile vampires. Totally different. And we actually have to spend court time and effort sorting this thing out. Yes, we have to logically lay out that, no, these things weren't happening. That is an established fact, and you can't rely on that for your defense, but it takes a week to do it. Because, okay, where we left off here. All right. Even after an attack, police often find the perpetrator doesn't fit into the neat category that they're used to working on, says John D. Cohen, a former assistant secretary for counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security. Nathan Allen, a 28-year-old physical therapist, killed 2 black people during a barefoot rampage in Winthrop, Massachusetts on June 26, 2021. Until that day, local police told Reuters Allen lived a quiet life. Not even his wife, suspecting he embraced racist theories or ultimately could commit murder. On Facebook, he posted loving notes about his wife and their pet rabbit and urged others to adopt bunnies too. That's a nice message, right up until the murder part. With no criminal record and no violence in his past, he went unchecked and unnoticed, Winthrop Police Chief Terrence Delahunty said. The night before the murders, Allen and his wife, Audrey Mazzola, attended a party. She decided to stay at the host's house. The next day, police records show, Allen texted Mazzola, who said she would brunch with her friends and then return home. Cutie, he responded. So, normal up until this point. Mazzola didn't respond to Reuters' request for an interview. I wouldn't either. A man who identified himself as her father in a telephone call said the family wouldn't speak with reporters. But minutes after that texting, Allen walked out of their apartment. Wearing no shoes, he carried 2 Smith & Wesson handguns, ammunition, and several books and journals. Nearby, he stole a large truck. Flooring the accelerator, he sped into town, weaving across lanes at high speeds. Clipping another vehicle, he crashed into a building. Bloodied, he left the vehicle and walked past a number of onlookers, all white. Moments later, he approached Ramona Cooper, a 60-year-old grandmother, an Air Force veteran, and shot her 3 times. She was the first black person he encountered. Hearing the commotion from his apartment, David Green, a retired state trooper, ran outside. Allen saw Green, a 68-year-old African-American, and shot him 7 times. Both died. A police officer arrived and told Allen to drop his gun. Allen raised his pistol, and the officer fired 11 times. Allen died at a hospital. When police searched his apartment, they found racist screeds handwritten on the unused pages of old school notebooks. More of his writing, reviewed by Reuters, featured anti-Semitic drawings and complaints that women, including his wife, didn't understand white male superiority. White men are apex predators, he wrote. All it's going to take is a little nudge. Then whites in the U.S. will snap. Yeesh. After the murders, radical right cyberspace rang with praise. On the Telegram messaging app, an anonymous user created a poster adorned with crosses hailing Saint Nathan Allen. Because police had speculated that Allen may have been targeting a local synagogue before crashing and changing plans, the poster read, "We have to admire his ability to adapt and improvise under high stress and unfathomable pressure." Yikes. Next section here, I'd be better in jail or dead. Aldrich, the gamer turned mass killer, the gamer, one of many gamers turned mass killers, had telegraphed some of his bigotry. He had also had trouble with the law, spending nearly 2 months in jail after threatening to kill his grandparents. Born in California in May of 2000, Aldrich had an itinerant, volatile home life, according to friends, court documents, and testimony. His parents divorced while he was a baby. His father, a mixed martial arts fighter, like Mark Wayne Mullen, what do you know? And later an actor in the adult film industry, that'll weird you out, moved out. Oh, good. With his mother and later her parents, Aldrich lived in cities across California and Texas, where he finished high school. Afterward, they settled in Colorado Springs. What a fantastic place to radicalize, and it is. Along the way, Aldrich was bullied, often because of his dad's porn career. The father, Aaron Brink, told a San Diego television station after his son attacked Club Q, He urged Aldrich to fight back, because he was an MMA guy as well, and said, "I praised him for violent behavior really early," he told the station. Brink died earlier this year. Wow, what a role model. They live a long time, usually, mixed martial arts fighters turned porn stars, making good choices along the way. Aldrich's mother, Laura Vopel, had legal problems. In 2008, court records show she was convicted of public intoxication in California, although, honestly, she has some pretty good excuses in her family life. In 2013, she was convicted of criminal mischief for burning a house in Texas. That's not great. Through her attorney, Carrie Thompson, Vopel declined to speak with Reuters. In testimony to a Colorado court following the 2021 threatening of his grandparents, Aldrich said he suffered unspecified abuse as a young child. He also said his home life caused mental health problems. "I had been refusing to take care of myself, refusing to be diagnosed with illness, and refusing to take the medicine," he said. It isn't clear whether any doctor formally diagnosed him with any mental illness. In 2019, Aldrich enrolled in a Colorado college but never attended. He hoped to join the military but didn't enlist because he doubted he could pull his own weight. "How could I take care of a brother in arms if I couldn't even take care of myself?" Aldrich told the court. That same year, Aldrich met his gamer buddies on Discord, an online platform where users can text and place audio and video calls. The platform, which has a broad variety of users, is known to be popular with many in the alt-right, as the racist, nationalistic, and other extreme elements of the right have come to be known. In a statement, John Redgrave, Discord's vice president of trust and safety, said the company has a zero-tolerance policy against violent extremism, at times removing content, banning users, shutting down servers, and engaging with law enforcement. Redgrave didn't address specific questions about Aldrich and his friends. The group was far-flung. Arroyo, the friend who said their banter was only for laughs, lives in Ohio. Another logged in from Illinois. A fourth lives in Australia. Still, they grew close, bonding over games like Sea of Thieves, in which players sail pirate ships. In time, Andy, as the gamers knew him, opened up, and he told them about rocky family relationships and struggles with depression, too said. "Andy was someone I considered to be my best friend." Luke Simpson, the gamer in Australia, told Reuters in a written response to questions. A telephone response would have been ill-timed, I'm sure, because he's in Australia. For 2 months in 2021, Aldrich left Discord. He'd been jailed. Since the move to Colorado, Aldrich lived in a house with his grandparents. His mother lived in a nearby apartment. In June of 2021, police records and court documents show Aldrich grew furious and pulled a pistol when his grandparents said they wanted the family to move to Florida. "You guys die today," he said, according to police records. Wow, that's elder abuse, if you ask me. All right, well, we're deep into this article, but we'll wind it up after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's wind this up. This is an awfully long article, but I don't know, insightful and relevant to things we read yesterday and things I still have yet to add to the record, but I have many other things to share with you before the weekend. And as you know, it's, for some reason, we believe on this show, extremely important that you be well informed for the weekend. Though honestly, you know, I hope you're taking the weekend off from some of these subjects. I don't know. It's the excuse we use for this kind of Friday show. So where were we? Yes, Aldrich had just threatened his grandparents with death because they wanted to move to Florida. Now, I understand objecting to moving to Florida, believe me. But, yeah, I wouldn't have taken it that far. The grandparents, of course, didn't respond to any request for comment from Reuters. Aldrich, the Pullens told police, the Pullens is the grandparents, said a move to Florida would ruin his plans to conduct a mass shooting. That does seem like, well, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's plenty of mass shooting opportunities in Florida, but he wanted to perpetrate them in Colorado, I guess. Is that where they were at the time? And, you know, all that planning would go out the window. That's unusual. And, why not more intervention at that point? He brandished a box of chemicals from the basement, they said, and boasted the contents could destroy a government building. Reuters couldn't determine the box's contents. Investigators later described them as consistent with bomb-making materials, a police document shows. It's unclear whether Aldrich on other occasions expressed plans for a mass shooting. Terrified, the Pullens told Aldrich they wouldn't move. He went to his mother's apartment, and the grandparents called police, who dispatched a SWAT team. He surrendered, hands in the air. Prosecutors charged Aldrich with kidnapping and menacing. His mother and grandparents urged the court for a second chance. Aldrich was released on bail after 7 weeks in jail. When the family refused to cooperate with further testimony, prosecutors dropped the charges. Back on Discord, Aldrich told his friends what happened. People make mistakes, Arroyo said they told him. If you need anybody, just come to us. Or maybe professionals. Aldrich confided further about his woes, and he began sharing more troubling content. Nick Brooks, the friend in Illinois, told investigators that Aldrich used the N-word a lot and used a slur for gay people, according to court transcripts. Brooks, in an email via his wife, declined to speak with Reuters. In the summer of 2022, Aldrich told the group he wanted to build a website to promote freedom of speech, Arroyo said. Well, that sounds familiar. The site, now defunct, featured an assortment of anonymous posts, far-right videos, memes, and messages. Reuters reviewed its content through web archives. One image featured Pepe the Frog. Remember being warned about Pepe the Frog so many years ago by Greg's Roundup? A certain cartoon mascot adopted by white nationalists. And this was an image featuring Pepe the Frog stabbing black people. I don't know if it gets any clearer than that. Another showed a rainbow flag, the symbol of gay pride, bearing a swastika. Of course. One video calling for the killing of blacks, Jews, and elected officials, well, some collection, had also inspired the shooter who in May 2022 killed 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, according to court records. By autumn, Aldrich appeared increasingly despondent. 3 days before his assault on the gay nightclub, he wept on a Discord chat. He told his friends his mother was breaking objects in the apartment. I'd be better in jail or dead, Arroyo told them. Arroyo said he told them. Shortly afterward, Aldrich sent Simpson, the friend in Australia, a street map of the area around Club Q. He didn't express any plan to attack it, Simpson told Reuters. Their last conversation was about video games. The map didn't lead me to think I'd see my friend behind bars, Simpson said. In a court filing by the attorneys who handled his guilty plea, Aldrich noted, without elaborating, that he was non-binary and wanted to be addressed by they, them pronouns. His attorneys, Michael Bowman and Joseph Archambault, didn't return calls or emails seeking comment. The night of the attack, Arroyo said, Aldrich texted him around 9 p.m., 3 hours before he entered the nightclub. I love you, man, Aldrich wrote. Are you okay? Arroyo answered, and Aldrich never responded. That's the end of the article. It's just an interesting backgrounder that I hold up against various other topics that touch on, similar material, the weird memes that emerge. And although so far they haven't motivated any Republican members of Congress to murder, I'm not kidding when I talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene as Murdery Trader Greene. I just don't know how long she can really hang on living in the world she lives in. But I guess maybe it can continue. I guess she'd probably be, sometimes I think she'd be more dangerous as a private citizen without a staff around her to, I don't know what, make her feel like she was effectuating change and having an impact in the world. Maybe that's it. We need to gather all these people up and tell them that they're members of Congress and let them gather somewhere and think that they are, but it's a giant prison planet instead. I don't know. Anyway, it just, seems like a bit of a trend, certainly more so than gay nutcrackers turning people into something else that they're supposedly not to begin with. Okay, let's see. I've got another story or two that I wanted to share, and this one is not nearly as long, but I thought I'd throw this one in there, and then we'll make sure that we get to our recorded segments. I'm not sure how this one came even to my attention, but I'm sure it was through one of the various social media channels. But But this too, I guess, a related subject, but also touching on a slightly different section of this issue area from, where am I reading? Minnesota Post, I guess. Nonprofit independent journalism supported by readers online, but it's got a Minnesota angle. That's, of course, why they're covering it. The Bourne conspiracy, not the fictional one, but the real one, involving a real person named Marlene Bourne. Who's Marlene Bourne? I don't know. You don't know, unless you read this article or have done your own research online. But guess what? You're about to find out. The Bourne conspiracy, how a Minnesotan's email became key evidence in Fox News Dominion voting systems lawsuit. That's the headline language for you, taking out all of the connective tissue, but you see where they're going. Sent just hours after Fox News called the election for Joe Biden, Minnesotan Marlene Bourne's wild email falsely claimed, quote, a piece of software, unquote, was inserted into Dominion voting machines that would change votes for Donald Trump to Biden. Anna Radelat, R-A-D-E-L-A-T, a staff writer at Min Post, has the byline on this, but it sounds a little weird. Like, pardon me, it's certainly not unlike other conspiracies you've heard, but the idea here is this is like being held out as a possible candidate of sort of the patient zero on this. Where did this ridiculous nonsense come from? It got us to the point where there was an attempted coup and an insurrection that, ended in the attack of the Capitol on January 6th. Where did all this nonsense come from? Was it just malcontents who were looking for any excuse to do some political violence? Yeah, maybe, in part. But this is sort of an interesting thing. So here is a screenshot of an excerpt from Marlene Bourne's email to former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell, conservative activist Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, and Fox News host Lou Dobbs. It is dated November 7th, 2020, so just about 3 years ago, a little bit more. Here's the story. Marlene Bourne, an artist who lives in the Twin Cities area, may be the alleged source of the voter fraud claims that resulted in a $1.6 billion lawsuit against Fox News by Dominion Voting Systems. It's interesting. I guess they haven't traced the provenance back in written materials that they've archived any further than this, but she almost certainly gleaned it off, another random cuckoo bird on the internet, I would imagine. This, and of course, claiming elections are rigged. That's an old trope too, but this is interesting. All Bourne did was write a lengthy email to Sidney Powell, a former federal prosecutor and conspiracy theorist who attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election. She also copied Fox News host Lou Dobbs and conservative activist Tom Fitton on her email, sent just hours after Fox and other news outlets called the election for Joe Biden on November 7th, 2021. Bourne's email said, quote, a piece of software, just a piece of it, was inserted into Dominion voting machines in several states that would automatically change 3% of the votes for Donald Trump to Biden. It's dumb, but that's what she wrote. It's dumb and wrong, but that's what she wrote. Now, the switched votes were capped at 3%, quote, because it was determined that anything higher than that would raise suspicions, Bourne wrote. But of course, she was so wise and all-seeing that she was able to detect the change, even though they stuck to the threshold that would make it undetectable. Anyway, she also, erroneously, reported links to Congress critters, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's longtime chief of staff, had to Dominion voting systems, which they didn't. Bourne told Min Post in an interview, she actually spoke to them, that the idea of voter fraud was a spur-of-the-moment thing because she wasn't really paying attention to the election. She said she had never heard of the voting systems company before, but heard the name Dominion somewhere that day and began to research the company, relying on her intuition and what she called a sixth sense that she says enables her to connect the dots, which, guilty. But I don't know. I don't think it's a sixth sense that I've got. It's just sort of, that's an interesting, it's my imagination, but sometimes it makes more sense than other times. But But I've never written to any federal prosecutors about it either. And I just thought that was an interesting, can that really be true? I've never paid attention to politics or the election. I was just walking down the street on November 7th, minutes after Fox News called the election for Biden, the election I didn't pay any attention to. And I said, oh, I heard a word, Dominion. I'm going to go research it obsessively over the internet, find what I find. And then, you know what? I should take my case, my imaginings to the highest levels possible. Sidney Powell and Lou Dobbs and Tom Fitton. Well, anyway, she's not well, I don't think. I am able to connect things that don't seem to connect, she said. Well, maybe they're not connected. I have this unique vision. I see things that other people don't. Yeah, I see dead people, but I got to try to deal with it. Bourne said she used her highly attuned awareness and ability to, quote, find a common thread to investigate Dominion voting systems. One of her first discoveries, that Dominion was a Canadian company, energized her. Isn't that in itself foreign interference? Bourne asked. Dominion has a U.S. headquarters in Denver, Colorado, as well as a headquarters in Toronto. I guess they do some business there in Canada as well. Bourne said it took her about an hour to piece together her information about Dominion and 10 minutes to write her lengthy email. So that's time spent, right? She's paid her dues. That email, first publicized by the Daily Beast, made other outlandish claims, such as an unfounded theory that the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was murdered. Oh my God. I think so too, but for good reason. But was murdered while being hunted for sport. Not that he was hunting for sport at a hunting lodge where he was staying and died in his sleep, which is what happened, but that he was in fact murdered as the quarry in this hunting for sport situation. No, Scalia died in his sleep. She also said Powell and the others copied that, Powell and the others copied that she, oh, I see. Okay. I gotcha. She told Powell and the others that she copied on the email, that she sent copies of it too, that she was ready for this one. I mean, no one's ready for this. What does this mean? By the way, you need to take me seriously. You should understand my theory to be grounded in reality because after all, I have been, as she said, internally decapitated in a 1992 car accident. So, how do you like that? Internally decapitated, whatever that means. And I've also been shot in the back after submitting a tip to the FBI. So, you should totally bring this theory to the air, don't you think? Bourne told the Minnesota Post, or the Min Post here, that she is apolitical. So, I don't vote. And I am completely bipartisan in that I dislike both parties, she said. That doesn't make you bipartisan, but okay. And I don't vote. But for some reason, I was hanging on every word to see who they called the election for on November 7th and immediately determined that it was fraudulent and I needed to speak to people who had access to the television waves and alert the media to my great theories that I see and other people don't about how my internal decapitation led me to understand okay, fine. Concerned about the ability to spy on people through technology, we all are, Bourne said she got rid of her cell phone several years ago and now only uses a landline. She said she thinks differently from other people. That's probably true. And admits her life is a little strange. As a matter of fact, the next section of the story is called Pretty Wackadoodle. Bourne's email came to light in court filings that include hundreds of pages of testimony, private text messages, and emails from top Fox News journalists and executives that have been made public in the defamation lawsuit filed by Dominion in Delaware's Superior Court. By the way, I should check. Is this a current piece? Is this dated? No, it's not a current piece. It's from March 15th, 2023. As I'm reading through this, I'm realizing a lot of this sounds like references to cases that are over already. But I don't know why this got recirculated, but this must have been probably in response to some of the other pretty wackadoodle stories that we just read about grab bag lunatics, et cetera, and the dumb things people are now claiming in court to try to get out of the charges filed against them. Well, anyway, As I said, this is from back in March. Those documents showed that Fox was in crisis after the election, having alienated core viewers by being the first on election night to call Arizona for Biden. Here they had gotten it all right and were the first ones to the story, and they still won't stand by themselves because it was easier for them to service the lie. How odd. Dominion says they show that Fox News hosts, or the emails show that Fox News hosts were more interested in appeasing those viewers than accurately reporting the 2020 election wasn't stolen, even if they themselves did not believe there was voter fraud. And it is an odd thing. What a weird position Fox News finds themselves in. They're the first to call the election for Biden, and that makes their viewership angry, so they have to go and say, we were wrong in our first out of the box and accurate report. Like, we scooped the whole, I mean, everybody kind of knew Biden had won by that point, but we were the first ones out with the call. And then that made our viewers mad. And so we had to latch onto something we knew wasn't true in order to make up for that thing that we had reported that was true. And to say you're a news organization, amazing. Dominion claims Fox News personalities and guests amplified claims that the company rigged the 2020 election, even though many at the network knew the allegations were false. Documents made public in the lawsuit show that less than an hour after receiving it, Powell forwarded Bourne's email. Imagine sharing that with somebody. To Maria Bartiromo, and the Fox News host allowed Powell to air claims of a vote-switching Dominion algorithm in an interview the next day. In case you're wondering about how stupid and crazy Sidney Powell is, she got this email. I've been internally decapitated, and said, I need to get on the air immediately and tell this woman's story. Dominion's lawsuit against Fox asks, what was the evidence for these far-fetched claims that Powell sent to Bartiromo the day before the broadcast? An email entitled Election Fraud Info Powell had Election Fraud Info Powell had received, because they capitalized the title. The email entitled Election Fraud Info, that, I would have said, Powell had received from a source, which the author describes herself as pretty wackadoodle. The email, also received by Dobbs, alleged Dominion was the one common thread in the voting irregularities in a number of states. Dominion's lawsuit says Bartiromo and Dobbs never disclosed the existence of Bourne's email. Probably because they did, in fact, recognize that it was pretty wackadoodle, but they had gone with it anyway. And so they just sort of said, well, a source tipped us off. Was it a crazy-ass moron source? It was, but I don't want to volunteer that information. A spokeswoman for Fox News told Min Post in a statement, neither Bartiromo nor her producer used Bourne's email in their coverage. I guess they laundered it by saying, why don't we bring on Sidney Powell to spread the wackadoodle. Just don't say where you got it. By the way, this piece is illustrated or advertised in with an advertisement for a Nutcracker performance in which the stylized Nutcracker, a traditional white Prussian soldier type Nutcracker, or whatever this is supposed to be. Just noting for the record that popped up. Where were we? All right. Yeah. She said that during her deposition, Bartiromo testified repeatedly that she did not know who the writer was and didn't remember seeing the email beyond forwarding it to her producer to check out this internal decapitation thing. The Fox News spokeswoman conceded, however, that Bartiromo's show gave Powell the opportunity to advance Bourne's theories. To Fox News, the defamation suit is an attack on First Amendment rights, but they lost, so it doesn't matter. In the statement, the network said its court filings show Dominion has been caught red-handed using more distortions and misinformation in their PR campaign to smear Fox News and trample on free speech and freedom of the press. But to Dominion, Fox's willingness to allow the propagation of uncorroborated information like Bourne's shows malice. And it did, and that's why they lost. Bourne told Min Post she sent Powell the email about Dominion because the lawyer activist, quote, was the face of the voter fraud movement. She is, in fact, the face of voter fraud movement. She advocates very strongly for fraud in the vote, but okay. So I thought, let's give her some information and let that be a starting point, Bourne said. She also said she was surprised Powell did not do anything to advance the so-called findings in that sole email and has had no contact with any of those she reached out to with her allegations about Dominion. They didn't go further, she said. That's unfortunate for them. Is it? Bourne said that it was her civic duty to send the email that appears central to Fox's voter fraud campaign. It's sort of like what the Department of Homeland Security says. If you see something, say something, Bourne said. Raised in Fridley, is that right? Bourne, 58, said she soon realized I was different from the people I grew up with. I wanted to see the world. I saw there was more to life than just Minnesota, she said. My life is just one adventure after another. And I mean, how could you not feel that way if you write your wackadoodle email to somebody and suddenly there's an insurrection at the Capitol seeking to overthrow the United States government based on your email, essentially. I mean, that's got to be pretty life affirming, don't you think? I mean, it's not a great idea, but how could you not take it that way? Bourne said she traveled extensively as a technology analyst, lived in Arizona for about 10 years, and wrote 2 self-published books on nanotechnology, one for children. Check it for pornography. She said she stopped working as a nanotechnology consultant after the internet allowed others to do the type of research she was skilled at. My position was declining, and it wasn't AI she was talking about. In other words, she was a wackadoodle writing nonsense based on nothing, and then she realized, oh my God, millions of people can write wackadoodle nonsense based on nothing. I better get out of this game. Now, back in Minnesota, she creates art that evokes what she said were very happy years in Arizona, making cactuses and other desert-themed pieces out of folded paper. Wow. Swarovski crystals, glitter, and other materials. Yay. She said she's no stranger to celebrity, claiming to have been a consultant for some of the world's top CEOs, including Tim Cook of Apple. Hey, Tim Apple, what do you know? That relationship could not be verified. In any case, Bourne said she is content to make her art and watch the weirdness of the world. Wow. And can you imagine if you bought one of these little things, maybe at an arts and crafts show, you were supporting the insurrection and not even knowing. I'm glad this has come to light. Wow. Marlene Bourne, hero of the revolution, I guess. Wow. Okay. So we've eaten up most of the 3rd segment, which means the 4th segment should be largely guest contributions, because I really would like to get to these things. And I think I've kind of exhausted the reservoir that I have today of look at all the crazy people. And did you know that all of this was happening? We all know, what the results are and how much idiocy and craziness we see on TV, on the internet, elsewhere. Real life assembled outside the Capitol and, of course, inside the Capitol, smearing feces on. I mean, can you imagine writing this email and then all that happens? And I mean, how about this? Can you imagine writing that email and having all that happen and then looking and saying, look, a guy in a Water Buffalo Lodge hat is shirtless with a spear in the president's chair of the Senate, and there's feces smeared all over the wall, and we might have a civil war. That's good. I think I'll make some cactuses now. Oh, and the paper's called and they want to talk to me. Now, I just read like 15 articles that are all full of nobody would talk to us. They wouldn't respond to requests for comment because they know just how crazy this whole thing is. But Marlene Bourne answered. I find that interesting too. All right. We haven't got much time to the break, so maybe we spend the time. Do you want to read? Is there more craziness that they didn't bring out in this email? Let me see what is available in the screenshots here. So again, November 7th, 2020, Marlene writes, Dear Mrs. Powell, Mr. Fitton, and Mr. Dobbs, I was told to email you the following pieces of information. That's interesting. Who told her? Nobody asked that? They didn't get comment on that one? You're probably already aware of voting irregularities in a number of states, which have one common thread, Dominion voting systems. Don't you find it curious that Nadeem El-Shami, Nancy Pelosi's longtime chief of staff, is that right, is a key executive there? She isn't. And that Richard Blum, Senator Feinstein's husband, is not only a significant shareholder of that company, but in Avid Technologies as well. Is that true? That might be, I don't know, maybe. As a point of reference, back in 2009, Diebold sold their election machines division. An antitrust lawsuit was immediately filed that conveniently ensured that in 2010, Dominion Voting Systems would acquire the assets in order to restore competition. With the acquisition of another large California election machine company in the same time frame, that gave Dominion an even higher monopoly. Bigger monopoly. I was like, why did you say higher? Oh, there, the word high appears later. She too may be high at the time. But an even bigger monopoly than Diebold ever had, yet no one has ever filed an antitrust suit against them. Friends in high places indeed. You know, all just winking and saying, you know, it's conspiracy language. Yes, let's keep going. But the monopoly isn't necessarily the issue. It's the software. A piece of code was inserted. It just was. Such that once ballots were fed into the database for tabulation, up to 3% of votes for Mr. Trump would automatically switch to Mr. Biden. This was capped at 3% because it was supposedly determined, that anything higher than that would raise suspicions. But here I am with my suspicions raised nonetheless. How was this done? I don't know if this is the immediate continuation or not, but this is the next excerpt that's printed here. In conjunction with a company by the name of, Scytl, S-C-Y-T-L, and I think we've tried to pronounce that before from some other wackadoodle, which provides election night reporting and other online election management tools. You'd think that the kind of hugely important software would be developed and managed by a U.S. company or the U.S. government itself, which would only make it more suspect, of course. But no, it's based in Spain, and that's underlined, so that's new. Spain. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Got to turn this into the Everybody Else in the Morning Show shortly here. I'll just take one last look through there's two little excerpts left of this Marlene Bourne email. I'm just sort of fascinated by this actually, I guess I'm as fascinated both by the article itself and the email itself as the idea that this may have been the genesis somehow of all this craziness, where, she just discovered this stuff online. So it was circulating already, but it is interesting to see just how feverish the whole thing is, and interesting to see the extent to which Fox News was interested in laundering it. Like, not that much. They didn't want to talk about the source of it, and they left out most wackadoodle parts of the story as somehow irrelevant to the story they were trying to get across. They have a good eye for filtering out the garbage, much better than we do, certainly. But it's just interesting, like, how that happens. And of course, the idea that you would get such a letter and say, this needs to be looked into. She may have a point. I mean, this is, I guess, to bring it back to the beginning of the show, this is easily as dumb as, well, for one thing, spending your time talking about how somebody had spent their time talking about on Fox how gay nutcrackers and disabled black Santas were a huge problem. But I guess it's as easily as dumb as, hey, you should all be taking a second look at Osama bin Laden, whether that really happened or not, and obsessing over it. But just, I don't know, watching the process by which Fox says, yeah, news. Did you read the context of this letter? Like, I would have said, maybe it has a point, but we'll look crazy saying that maybe this crazy person has a point. Just as crazy as you would look reconsidering the historical legacy of Osama bin Laden. All right, what other things did she write in her letter? We left off where she said, the whole thing originates in Spain. Spain I haven't heard before. Venezuela, Italy, and their military satellites. Yes, sure, but Spain, What happened to that? Why did that go away? Why did it turn into Venezuela? But she goes on to say, well, it's based in Spain, even though, although I thought later she says, no, it's Canadian. Well, anyway, which means it's the Spanish who decide who wins our elections and who doesn't. Or do they? She actually asks that. And you can also hear the music in the background. Or do they? It's a bit of a corporate shell game with hundreds of companies involved. And while it appears that the ultimate parent company is actually British, oh, I didn't know that. I find it interesting that the owner is French. Here's a project for a curious investigative journalist to dig into. It's Spanish, it's Italian, it's French, it's British. By the way, what's the common thread here? There is no common thread except that, well, it's a voting system company, and they're selling their product in countries where they have votes on stuff. That's not even, I mean, it's a common thread, but it doesn't really tell you anything. But okay, and I don't even know if any of this is true, right? I don't know that there's any British, French, Spanish connection at all. She's just blathering. And they were like, yeah, put it on the air. But don't bring her. That's interesting too. Why not bring this wackadoodle on TV? We'll get somebody who's polished and together. Sidney Powell? That ain't the answer either. But they did it. I guess in their view, she presented as together and polished. You might want to see what ties Seitel, or however you pronounce it, company executives, all the way up the Shell Company food chain, have to the SSCI. SSCI? Are we talking about the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence? Yes, I think so. Because that is the root of everything here. The base of the pyramid, so to speak, in that respect. Daniel Jones, a Feinstein staffer. Is he? Maybe. I don't know. And his newly formed Penn Quarter Group are the fulcrum. I don't know whether... I guess this could strike somebody. Well, it strikes me, having been introduced as here's a wacko lady's letter. I see it as a wacko lady's letter. On the other hand, I guess if you're living in this world and you get this thing and you're like, wow, look at all these references to all these things. There's no backup, no links, no proof that Daniel Jones is even a person, much less a Feinstein staffer. I don't know. Did he form the Penn Quarter Group? Is there a Penn Quarter Group? What is the Penn Quarter Group? What's the difference? Who cares? But I guess it might look like, well, look at all this insider information, the references she's making. She knows what she's talking about. I must tell you, by the way, although she does a far better job in documenting all the links and connections that she's making, it doesn't read that differently if you suspend all disbelief, and all questions and don't require any proof. It doesn't read all that differently from a Marcy Wheeler piece, in the sense that, look at all these references. She can't just be making all this up. And with Marcy, at least you think, well, with her, you think she can't be making all this up because there really are links and references. Now, I could go read those things and come to a different conclusion than Marcy Wheeler did. But yeah, unfortunately here is Bourne with no links or anything like, and I guess that's the thing you can do with the forwarded email chain. I guess that's part of the right-wing ecosystem, and they're familiar with getting these things and not bothering to check. But I also don't think she's presenting a very good story for them, or a coherent one that they can present on the air. I guess so that's why they zoom in on one part and say, this will be our story, and none of the rest of it. By the way, the letter continues, that magic sweet spot of 3% isn't arbitrary. That's what American Express charges merchants as a transaction fee. And also happens to be the cut that Jared Kushner gets from all donations to the Gop. How do you like that? Which is line itemed in the software he helped create with his brother, I think it was, as a transaction fee. I thought I'd throw that in there in the interest of fairness to both sides. Isn't that interesting? How many votes will you switch from Trump to Biden? 3%. Why 3%? Well, because anything higher would raise suspicion. Are you sure that's how you came up to that? Well, in case you don't believe me, that's also the amount that American Express charges as a transactions fee. Oh, I do not see. I do not see at all. What difference would that make? Well, you see, it's the same number, 3%. Okay. I mean, How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop? 3, according to a cartoon owl from the 1970s. So there you have it. And if you don't believe me, you think I'm just being partisan? Well, Jared Kushner steals 3% of the donations to the Republican Party. Does he? I don't know, but 3, huh? Fairness. Okay. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, she goes on. There's also an issue with mail-in paper ballots. So get rid of those too. Not the absentee ballots, but the mail-in ballots arbitrarily sent to people. The ones that keep mysteriously appearing in the middle of the night through the mail. The paper used to print those does not have a special watermark, as is being reported. Instead, the paper fibers were embedded, not with bamboo, but with anti-counterfeiting security features to detect fraud, much like how the Treasury embeds security features into paper money. I'll bet it's digital DNA, nanotechnology. And I'm an expert on nanotechnology. What the effing F is she even talking about? No one knows. No one knows. There's one little extra clip down here. It won't take long to run through. This reads, as for Mr. Dobbs, it says, are you aware that Mr. Ailes, and she probably means aware, that Mr. Ailes, Mr. Murdoch, and the handful of other non-U.S. owners of the major U.S. media outlets, like yours, secretly huddle most days to determine how best to portray Mr. Trump as badly as possible? The global hatred of the man has everything to do with the fact that as a political outsider, Mr. Trump has disrupted a well-oiled global money laundering operation. Remember, she's apolitical. She doesn't pay any attention to anything. One that revolves around the Congress critters, lobbyists, and public relations firms. There are trillions at stake. Never come between a thief and his money. The recent COVID relief bills are simply one mechanism to try to feed money they've lost out on over the past 4 years back into that system. I mean, wow. And there's probably more to it. That's just all that they're showing. But I mean, I don't know. I just find that fascinating that you could get that, receive that, and have an organization say, we'll put this on the air, we'll tell this story, we'll bring in experts to tell it. Not this wackadoodle. We recognize she's too weird. We'll get other people who are also too weird to do this. And then they get sued and then they lose and all that. And then for years, other journalists at other operations are running around saying, no, they're Fox News. It's a real, you can't discriminate against them. That's unfair. Wow. All right. So I think that wraps up the through line for today, as far as I can take it anyway, without also bringing you the prepared segments from Rosalyn MacGregor, who takes us hyper local again. But I love, this is also a great through line, following the foibles of this one small section of Michigan and the things that they do when they get a hold of power. And as it turns out, just as with the larger federal government, when wackadoodles gain control of local government, they do things that F stuff up and cost everybody lots of money. Let's hear what the latest is from Michigan now. Rosalyn.
Good morning, David. Today's segment is about the horrible consequences of electing right-wing nutballs with grifters for friends to local office.
Well, we don't have many of those, do we?
Listeners will recall my numerous reports about the Board of Commissioners for Ottawa County, Michigan. A slate of radicals called Ottawa Impact started running the county in January. Ottawa Impact is a far-right fundamentalist group created by now Chairman Joe Moss and Vice Chair Sylvia Rodia after they unsuccessfully challenged the previous board and county health officer over COVID-19 mitigation mandates in 2020 and 2021. Moss has connections to both Michigan Republican Chairwoman Christina Caramo and the new law firm KLG that the county uses after firing the old lawyers. They tried to fire the health officer. She filed suit in February against the unlawful action. Recently, the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners was planning to vote to fire her for cause following a 2-day termination hearing, but instead went into closed session for more than 8 hours, largely used for negotiations with her attorney. The commissioners came out of the meeting with a plan to settle the health officer's lawsuit against the county for $4.1 million. One commissioner objected and called the settlement offer, quote, an abuse of the taxpayers, unquote. He said the decision to pay, quote, goes against every principle of good governance and fiscal conservatism. We were given reasonable options, but they would not consider anything less than a guaranteed outcome, he said, unquote. The county agreed to pay her to step down rather than follow through on a vote to fire her after a 2-day termination hearing. The deal also includes the resignation of the deputy health officer, who has been on paid administrative leave. She'll receive a 1 year's pay at $125,000 plus the benefits she currently receives. But it's only the latest in a series of added costs to taxpayers since the new commissioners took office. The county is on track to spend more than $5 million in unplanned costs since the beginning of the calendar year. The lion's share of those costs are numerous lawsuits plus severance payouts for positions eliminated in January and added or expanded positions in departments, according to county fiscal records. The litigation in the health officer case has been costly, reaching $82,000 between the months of February and July, the most recent documentation available. Those costs don't reflect a hearing before the Michigan Court of Appeals, a hearing in Muskegon County's 14th Circuit Court, and the 2-day termination hearing, all of which took place in October. A second lawsuit has cost the county $22,000 for the months of March through July. In March, 4 residents sued the board, claiming county commissioners violated Michigan's Open Meetings Act when they made several controversial decisions during their first meeting. That case is awaiting oral arguments before the Michigan Court of Appeals after the residents appealed a lower court's ruling granting the board's request to dismiss the lawsuit. Also not yet accounted for are costs accrued from 2 different lawsuits, both filed in October. First, a Grand Haven pastor sued in federal court claiming religious discrimination by Chairman Moss. Reverend Jared Kramer of St. John's Episcopal Church said Moss is using his petition to, quote, endorse a particular set of religious beliefs and exclude a particular set of religious beliefs, unquote, and therefore, quote, is discriminating against certain religious beliefs, unquote, which is a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Second, a finalist for an executive aide position sued in Ottawa County's 20th Circuit Court, alleging age discrimination by County Administrator John Gibbs when he hired a younger candidate with fewer qualifications than the county required. That case has been assigned to Kent County's 17th Circuit Court. On top of all this, the cost of day-to-day legal expenses has also increased. In August, the board again upped the budget for legal fees, which, with Moss backing an increase in the fiscal year 2024 budget, which began October 1st. KLG's hourly rate will increase from $225 per hour to $240 per hour on January 1st per its contract with the county. Those rates at 35 hours per week will total $430,000 for the fiscal year, which is $55,000 higher than the amount presented in the initial budget discussions in early August. County commissioners also pushed through a change to KLG's contract in February, extending the agreement to 3 years, 1 year beyond all the current commissioners' terms, and changed the terms and conditions under which the board can fire KLG. So, David, as Moms for Liberty has shown us, there are real consequences to electing the wrong people to local office. Ottawa County now has fewer resources to provide services to their residents thanks to the political ambitions of grifters and their grifting friends. Back to you, David.
All right. Thank you, Rosalyn. And a good point. Well made at that. Greg has a comment on the whole thing.
That's bullshit.
I agree. I think we all agree with that one. But yes, demonstrating the actual consequences and dollar and cents consequences from electing or allowing wackadoodles to serve in office like this. It's another part of the through line of the whole show. Now I've got another one to say, and this is basically going to eat up the rest of the segment because, I did a bad job distributing these throughout the show, but this is important. Steve Satig sent this one in. You'll remember him as soon as you hear him, and he'll tell you why. But this is Jessica Valenti's piece, which I think it involves a prediction of sorts, a political prediction, which I think will probably come to pass fairly quickly. So it's important that we get it on the record. I was going to read it for you, and it would take me 20 minutes to do what Steve did in about 8. Let's roll it.
Hi, David and fellow Kagro X fans. This is Steve from California. As David says, the voice like Frank Zappa. At any rate, I found a piece by Jessica Valenti, who has a Substack called Abortion Every Day. And she has an interesting insight, I think, here that I wanted your listeners to hear. It's called Donald Trump's Abortion Plan. He's going to take credit for pro-choice wins. I know, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump either, but as the country speeds towards 2024, it's vital that we're 5 steps ahead of what the disgraced former president has in store for abortion rights. And I've got to tell you, I'm worried. There's no doubt that if re-elected, Trump, who appointed the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe, would continue to decimate abortion rights. But Trump, obsessed with winning above all else, knows that bans are incredibly unpopular. So he's adjusted his message accordingly, working to position himself as an abortion moderate. Over the last few months, Trump has criticized Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' 6-week abortion ban as a terrible mistake, blamed the GOP's midterm losses on anti-abortion extremism, and spent time on the campaign trail calling other Republicans too extreme. At an Iowa rally in September, for example, Trump told the audience that he supports exceptions for abortion bans. Quote, "Without the exceptions, it is very difficult to win the elections. We would probably lose the majorities in 2024 without the exceptions, and perhaps the presidency itself." End quote. He even went on Meet the Press to claim he'd make both sides happy. It makes sense. Trump can see the writing on the wall right along with the polls, and with Republicans still stinging over last week's pro-choice victories, it's never been clearer that abortion rights wins elections. As we all know, Trump really likes winning. That's why I think the former president is about to add a new abortion talking point to the mix, a prediction that came to me after listening to his new radio ad running in Iowa. In the ad, launched after last week's election, a female voice says Trump nominated conservative judges, leading to Roe v. Wade being overturned and returned to the states. It was the focus on return to the states that did it for me. After all, the states just sent a very clear message on abortion. They want it to be legal. Yes, talking about returning abortion to the states is a common Republican refrain, but something about its inclusion in an ad launched right after these state-level GOP losses felt interesting. That's when it hit me. He's going to take credit for Ohio or any other pro-choice wins. Hear me out. Trump loves nothing more than taking credit for wins, any wins. I can very easily imagine him at a campaign rally or in a Fox News interview, saying that the only reason Ohio voters were able to get abortion in their state constitution was because of him. He gave the decision back to the states. Wasn't that generous? In the same way that Trump has never stopped taking credit for end of Roe, he will take credit for anything that happens after it. What better way to appease Republican women who have been horrified by all the post-Roe horror stories they've been reading? By focusing on returning abortion to the states, applauding whatever outcome once that happens, Trump is giving those female voters a gift, the illusion that they still have a choice. Those are the votes he needs most. Republican strategists report that Trump is trying to woo the suburban women who voted for him in 2016, but not in 2020. What about the anti-abortion voters he might anger along the way? As one strategist told The Hill, they'll come back in the general election. They're not going to vote for Joe Biden. The truth is that Trump's criticism of the GOP's anti-abortion extremism hasn't hurt him in the primaries anyway. A USA Today poll of New Hampshire Republicans, for example, showed that attacks from other candidates on Trump's abortion comments didn't make a dent. 63% of respondents reported that abortion wasn't that important to them, and 35% said protecting abortion rights was very important or the most important issue to them. Other polling from Navigator Research showed that Republicans see Trump as less extreme on abortion than the other candidates, with a fifth of them believing the former president wants abortion to be legal. I've been warning about this tightrope walk for months, because Trump gave conservatives the Supreme Court justices that ended Roe, he thinks his pro-life bona fides provide him the standing and wiggle room to criticize the party's extremism and paint himself as just anti-abortion enough to win elections. And while taking credit for both pro- and anti-choice wins may come across as noncommittal on abortion, that apathy could actually be advantageous. In September, for example, I wrote that for the Republican women looking for a reason to vote for Trump, believing he doesn't really give a shit about the issue could be compelling. It gives those voters the impression he won't work hard to implement abortion bans and restrictions. Lo and behold, in the New York Times this week, a Pennsylvania woman told reporters, quote, "I haven't seen Trump say something either way on abortion. He doesn't seem to care either way, and that's fine with me," end quote. She plans to vote for him. Again, we know that if elected, Trump will continue to strip away abortion rights. Top conservative and anti-abortion leaders who have spoken privately with Trump are confident he'll come through and push for a national ban. And given that a Republican president could try to use the Comstock Act to ban most abortions, however afraid we are of a Trump presidency, we're not nearly afraid enough. Here's the good and bad news. Trump's ability to successfully sell this lie of being an abortion moderate is going to come down largely to mainstream media coverage. Will newspapers and cable television shows report his feigned softening on abortion as fact or the ruse that it is? So far, they're falling for it. When Trump went on Meet the Press in September, he insisted that abortion providers, quote, "kill the baby after birth," end quote, 7 different times. Yet NBC News takeaway and headline was that Trump wants to, quote, "bring the country together," end quote, on abortion. A CNN fact check of the interview found that of all the topics that Trump lied about, abortion was the issue on which he was most dishonest. And as Popular Information points out today, Trump's media manipulation seems to be working across the board. Outlet after outlet is giving him the framing he wants around abortion. That has got to stop. The other hurdle, of course, is President Joe Biden. The Biden administration is worried about Trump's abortion messaging. After his Meet the Press interview, Politico reported that the Biden campaign was concerned Trump would be able to successfully, quote, "weasel himself into a more moderate position on an issue proven to be a vulnerability for the Republican Party," end quote. And, as The Atlantic pointed out in September, Democrats will have a harder time tarring Trump as an extremist if he's talking mostly about compromise and accusing his own party of extremism. The big issue, though, is Biden's own squeamishness about abortion. Since Roe was overturned, the president has not risen to the occasion, not even close. He barely even uses the word abortion. If Trump is the only candidate talking about abortion directly, no matter what he says, we have a big problem. This is not the time for Biden to respond with half measures and the rhetoric of safe, legal, and rare. He needs to talk about abortion openly and enthusiastically. Anything less, and frankly, we're fucked. Over the next few months, it's vital that we're holding both Biden and the mainstream media to account. Abortion rights has the votes and the popular support it needs. Now we just need everyone else to do their jobs.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve, and I appreciate your contribution in getting us through that article. An important one to add to the record between now and the weekend, which is only a few hours away, and plenty more, of course, that I could share with you. And one thing I'll run out or just trot out for you again. I think we probably snuck it in last week, too. I mentioned to you, at least, that I had seen a Raw Story report that murdery Trader Green already calling for Speaker Mike Johnson's ouster, I guess, because of his being willing to put forward, probably it was a CR. I'll have to check back on that one. But I also see that it's a theme that's been picked up by others. Media Matters actually has put together a compilation of right-wing media attacks against Mike Johnson and House Republicans in general over the government funding deal just published yesterday by Jacina Hollins Borges. I hope I've got the name right, over at Media Matters, and a large collection of attackers here, including, let's see, Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Steve Deese, let's see, and Ben Shapiro now on the board as well. Charlie Kirk comes back with another one. Nick Fuentes joining in, just in case you wanted a Holocaust denier among them. And, of course, everyone's favorite right-wing Twitter troll, Cat Turd, which, boy, the historians are just going to have a field day one day. Coming to see what sort of influence Cat Turd had on everything. And I guess, although it will make things clearer, like, can you believe this crazy letter from Marlene Bourne of Minnesota? Yes, well, look what happened afterwards. Cat Turd became a major influencer with that name. And then, of course, a couple of lesser figures as well that I've never heard of before being named among those attacking Johnson. The real question, though, is whether any of it will take hold, and it may not, and that may be largely because he's going to get a pass for whatever reason for passing largely the same deal that Kevin McCarthy did. And it may just come down to, like we have said in the past and we said yesterday, the junior high school level. People just didn't like McCarthy, and they're just not yet convinced whether or not they like Mike Johnson. And another angle on it pointed out in social media, though I didn't grab the post, so I can't credit it properly, but somebody saying, it may just be that, like yesterday I thought it was, well, it's just the glasses, or Mike Johnson just looks like a responsible person and sounds like a responsible person to a Republican. I mean, to me, he sounds like a crazy idiot, but to them, he presents a decent face that's at least arguably intellectual, and I mean, that's what people seem to like about Newt Gingrich, even though that was never true. He just presents that way, and Kevin McCarthy always presented as an empty-headed idiot, and they were just fed up with that, maybe. Or maybe it was just more personal than that. Maybe he was elbowing him in the back a lot and we just didn't know about it. But someone else's theory was, well, Kevin McCarthy, because he's an empty-headed idiot, though he was willing to do the bidding of the culture warriors, he was never really capable, mentally, intellectually, of leading the culture warrior movement. He would reflect it all. He would take their talking points and run with them. And that seemed good enough at the time, but it wasn't good enough long term. Mike Johnson, though, provides the glasses and suit and hairdo that it takes to look like an intellectual leader on culture war. And so maybe they'll continue to give him a pass. But, well, here, as we see, already an assembly of culture warriors looking to oust him because of their own ideological consistencies. What? What the hell? When did that happen?
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
It's a theory anyway, and there's another one following this show on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, where Justice Putnam will bring you his theories, beginning with the story of Elon Musk's shocking pronouncement of anti-Semitism. Can you believe it? Well, it's not only repellent on its face, but it also happens to be abhorrent that he actually believes it, and advertisers are responding. He'll take you there and further next.